Hello, fourth year students. Today we have a new lecture in poetry with the poem entitled The Thought Fox by Ted Hughes, who's another English poet from the time period of the 50s. We are talking, of course, now about modern poetry, and we are talking particularly about the post-war, let's say, period. So this poem, actually, it's not a very long one, and at the same time, it's not very hard to understand what's the idea, what's the theme behind it. The Thought Fox. And actually, the title itself is really expressive of the content of the poem. So what we expect to find is, as we usually see in Ted Hughes' poetry, is some kind of animal imagery. And this is something that Hughes is really famous for, using the imagery of animals and trying to employ them in order to convey or to communicate certain themes or subjects behind the simple, let's say, expression of this animal. So in the beginning, he shows us the animal itself as a physical, let's say, creature, and then he goes deeper into the symbolism or the meanings behind this animal, or how he understands the influence of this animal. Okay, so what do we need to know about the poem? Let's see here. It was published in Ted Hughes' first collection in 1957. So it was from the early poetry, we can say, of Hughes, early published work, we can say. Hughes mentioned that he wrote it after not writing for a year. Why this point is important? Because we are going to see that this poem is about poetry itself. It's about writing poetry. See, so the let's say the occasion in which the poem was written is related to the poet's inability to write for a long time. He was not able to write for you can say a relatively long period of time. 1 year is a very long time for a poet. So this poem came out after this period. So it's about poetic creativity and the process of writing. How does it happen? I mean, this is a question that we can find not only in Hughes' poetry, but we can find it in many other poets. In their poetry, they have always this kind of concern about how can I write poetry, or where does it come from? Or what if the source of my inspiration fades, or what if I cannot write anymore? This is really one of the concerns of the poets throughout ages. The process of poetic creativity, to what extent or to what length the poet is able to maintain his ability to write. It's something that really concerns poets. Hughes grew up in Yorkshire, in rural surroundings. Why this is important? Because why would a modern poet use so much animal imagery? Of course, we are, as students of literature, we have studied poetry throughout ages before. We have studied the, let's say, the 16th, the 17th. We know that the 18th wasn't really rich with poetry, but the 19th with the Romantic poets, then the Victorian in the, let's say, the late 19th, and then it comes to the 20th. We know that somehow using the animal imagery is a classical, or let's say even romantic. يعني خلينا نقول مو classical بالمعنى اللي هو الكلاسيكية اللي هي عكس الرومانسية. لا، القصد هنا انه موضوع تقليدي، موضوع قديم. استخدام الحيوانات، فكرة استخدام الحيوانات كمجاز، كاستعارة. You see, using animals. So we remember, actually, we remember many examples of poems that we have studied earlier, which includes animals and the influence of these animals on the speaker or the character in the poem. Specifically, maybe I can recall now the poetry of William Blake. You remember? Also the poetry of the Romantic poets, when they speak about the influence of certain animals like birds on them. You see? So for Hughes, what is the reason behind this? It seems like an obsession with animals. because we can find so many examples of poems written by him, including animals. It's because he was himself raised in a rural surroundings, and in the early years of his life, he used to be a hunter, going as a sport, of course. He was going as a young boy, as a young fellow. He used to go in hunting trips with his brother. So this is something that really captured his own mind and attention. The animals he was trapping, the let's say the soul of these animals, their liveliness, the connection that one can establish with these animals. So this is the reason behind his interest in animals and nature. Okay, animals appear in his poetry very often. He uses the animal imagery and symbolism to express a theme or a subject. So this is something very famous and regular when we are talking about Ted Hughes poetry. The poem manifests many influences on Hughes. This is what we are going to see later. We are going to connect this poem with other poems of poets that we know. If we read Hughes' biography, we are going to see this piece of information that tells us that Hughes were really hugely influenced by a group of poets. He mentions them, and we will see that the poets that he was influenced by also use what animal imagery, nature poetry, something like this. So we can say that this is part of the influence of these poets on him. Now we come to the poem. It's very simple and very short indeed. I imagine this midnight moment's forest, something else is alive, beside the clock's loneliness and this blank page where my fingers move. Through the window I see no star, something more near, though deeper within darkness, is entering the loneliness. Cold delicately as the darkest snow, a fox's nose touches a twig leaf. Two eyes serve a movement that now and again, now and now and now. So from the very beginning in the first line, when he says, I imagine, he takes us into his imagination. And we might think that here we are not really sure whether he's imagining or he's talking about something real around him. Maybe it is something in between, or maybe he's still trying to reach out to his own imagination, but still he's not able to. Okay, and notice the use of the word imagine here. The speaker, first we have this note: the speaker, a poet, is sitting alone in his room surrounded by a forest, which could be metaphorical, not real one. He's trying to write on the blank page before him. So now we are looking at a poet sitting before his desk, and there is this blank page on in front of him. So what does he need? He needs to what? To focus, to try to come out with some thoughts or ideas in order to write a poem. Okay, we are talking here about the process of writing now. Okay, so the word imagine, what is the significance of this word? It gives the sense of a thing that is happening now. So he's trying to show us that this is a process. Okay, I'm going to show you a process, how things come to the mind of a poet. How does this whole thing of imagination, how does it happen? Okay, so what is the significance of this? It places the reader with the poet in the same context. He's trying to make us what? Participate with him, share with him this experience. So this is what the word imagine in the present form, if you notice. So something else is alive. Well, when he's sitting like this, he feels that there is something alive. He feels a kind of presence around him. Okay, and here we can think of it as what? Maybe he's talking about the ideas. They are there. He feels that there are certain ideas in his mind, but still they are not clear now. Still, he feels them, just feeling. What is around? Beside the clock's loneliness. So it's silent around him. The only sound he could hear is the ticking of the clock. هاي صوت الساعة تك تك. Okay, and this blank page, so now he's let's say he's preparing for what, for writing. Through the window I see no star. He's sitting beside the window and he was looking outside. There are no stars. And you see, the mentioning of stars, because we all know that stars also are related to the idea of inspiration, the coming down of stars. If you remember the poem The Tiger by William Blake, you studied this poem in the third year. When he was talking about the tiger, describing the tiger, and he says the stars coming down like spears. There's this expression. Actually, the image of the stars coming down is related, or sometimes by the poets is associated with the coming down of what? Of inspiration. يعني مثل ما النجوم، مثلا خلينا نقول إذا هي ليلة هادئة بس أكو نجوم، the let's say the movement of the stars or the يعني خلينا نقول حركة النجم، مثلا من النجم يهبط هبوط، هذا يعتبر كأنما يرمز أو يشير إلى يعني قدوم الإلهام. You see? So when he's looking now outside the window and he's seeing no stars, as if he's telling us that actually I'm looking for this spark of inspiration. Where is it? There are no stars. There are no inspiration right now. But he wants it to come. Okay? He's waiting for it. Something more near. So this is the stars are really far away, but there is something else. What is this thing? It is more near. It's closer to him than the stars. What is this thing? Though deeper within darkness. So the darkness around him when he's looking out of the window, in the darkness of the forest, okay, he feels something is coming. What is this thing? Is entering the loneliness, as if it is intruding. دخيل، كأنما هاي الهدوء والظلام وهاي الحالة من السكون، فجأة أكو شيء يدخل. Something enters. What is this thing? Cold delicately as the dark snow, a fox's nose touches twig. It is a fox. هذا هو الحيوان اللي احنا نحكي عنه بهاي القصيدة، هو الثعلب. The fox. And how does it move? How does it move? Notice here, it's important to speak about the movement of the fox. Why is it important? Because this motion of the fox, how does it enter? And then how softly it moves around. It is something like what? Like a metaphor for the idea. The idea is coming. Okay, the idea that the poet needs in order to write is coming, but not directly, let's say just like the stars falling from the sky. No, they are coming just like a fox, and we all see foxes. شايفين الثعلب من يتحرك؟ يعني يتحرك بحذر، ببطء، ممكن يعني يترقب، بيشوف الأشياء من حوله. It doesn't come directly. It doesn't come or into a certain area or somewhere directly. It is careful in its movement. So it doesn't come easily to a place. الثعلب يعني حركته شوي بيها نوع من المكر، نوع من الخفة، التسلل يعني. So what about ideas? Don't you think that ideas they are just like foxes? They move inside the mind, but they don't come directly to the mind of the poet. Actually, I think they are very similar. Okay, how does it move? Notice here, it comes, its nose touches the twig. Two eyes serve a movement. So the eyes of the fox, he's looking around. He's scanning the place. Does he need to go forward, go back to the darkness? You see, يعني أكفد حركة حذرة يعني. A fox gently touches its cold nose to twigs and leaves in the darkness. The fox carefully scans the surrounding with his eyes time and time again. Okay? Now, sets neat prints into the snow. So as it is moving, the pose. شايفين الحيوانات من تمشي خصوصا يعني إذا أكو ثلج، إذا أكو يعني طين تراب، فتترك طبعة رجله يعني. Prints into the snow. This is also we can say the effect that the ideas or thoughts leave in the mind of the poet. Between trees and warily a lame shadow lags by stump and in hollow. Here he's talking about how this fox is moving inside the let's say the trees, the trees in the forest. The shadow behind it, notice here, his shadow behind him appears like an injured animal. When you look at it يعني الظل مالته يبين كأنه هو إذا يتحرك يعني عرج. شوفوا هاي كلمة lame كأنما أعرج، كأنما مجروح, as if he's dragging himself. But if you look at the animal itself, you find that it is walking with confidence, with boldness. Okay? And in hollow of a body that is bold to come. Actually, the fox knows where it is going. Across clearings. Clearings are the spaces that you find between the trees in a forest. يعني هاي كل المساحات اللي بين الأشجار، بين النباتات بالغابة اللي تمشي بيها، يعني يقدر يمشي بيها الحيوان أو الإنسان. An eye. Now something happens. An eye. A widening, deepening greenness. The fox suddenly. شايفين الحيوانات من تتحرك يعني أول شيء مثلا ممكن هو يمشي، خلينا نقول بس هيك يتحرك مثلا بين الأشجار بين النباتات، بس فجأة إذا فد شيء يلفت انتباهه، شو يصير؟ شلون يصير شكل الحيوان أو حتى طريقة النظرة مالته، عيونه. How does it look? Actually, it seems to be really attentive. Suddenly, their ears, their eyes, their whole body appearance changes when they are caught by something. Something catches their attention. يصير عندهم هاي الحس الغريزة مالتهم تنتبه يعني. So here the eyes of the fox are widening, they are green, brilliantly, concentratedly, as if something caught his eyes, his vision, and he's looking at it and he's focused. كأنما صار اكو تغيير بحالة الفوكس. Okay? This let's say stanza is really important because here in this stanza we can find this is the point where let's say the thoughts, the inspiration reaches to its climax in the mind of the poet. هنا توصل المرحلة الإلهام والأفكار اللي يريدها الشاعر، هنا يعني توصل للقمة، للذروة، climax. Okay? Coming about its own business, till with a sudden sharp hot stink of fox it enters the dark hole of the head. Okay? Coming out of the darkness of the forest, now the fox enters into the head of the poet. طبعا هذا metaphorically، يعني احنا نحكي من ناحية الاستعارة والمجاز. So at this moment the fox's eye widens and seems to concentrate on something ahead. This sudden change reflects on the poet's mind as well. The scent of the fox engulfs the poet's senses. So what happens here is as if the poet has become one with the fox, as if the instincts of the poet also were awakened. There is something that now both the fox and the poet are sharing now. Okay? Now they are blending. لاحظوا هاي الكلمة. Filling the dark hole in his head. يعني الكاتب كأنما قبل لا يكتب أكو فجوة سوداء في عقله. He needs to be, this hole needs to be filled with ideas. Okay, with inspiration. So blending with his own instincts. تلاحظون هذا الشيء مو جديد، احنا شفناه واحد شعراء مثلا they ask to be one with nature, with some element of nature. إذا تذكرون Shelley, for example, Shelley in third year درستوه بالثالث، اللي كان مثلا يخاطب الويست ويند، الريح الغربية. To be one with it so that it gives him the power to write poetry. لاحظوا هذه الفكرة انه الشاعر يريد فد قوة فد روح تساعده على كتابة الشعر. Okay, so now it seems that the change in the state of the fox also signifies a change in the state of the poet. Now he can write, the ideas come to his mind. Okay? The window is starless still. Still looking now as if the poet has returned back to real life. تمام؟ يعني سرح هو لفترة، هسه آخر سطرين رجع للواقع، للمحيط الحقيقي اللي هو قاعد بيه. He returns to the real world. What does he find? The clock ticks. Still, the sound of the clock is around. He can hear it. The page is printed. The page, the blank page, now is filled with words. He has written a poem. Okay? يعني طبعا إذا تلاحظون هذا السطر الأخير, this very last line, it gives us some kind of surprise. يعني we were surprised that how does it come that the page now is printed. يعني هو طول القصيدة حكالنا هاي البروسيس كلها وشون الثعلب وطلع من الظلام وشون، يعني احنا ربطنا الموضوع بشنو، بأفكاره. يعني the fox represents the poet's thoughts in his mind, right? The coming of the fox out of the darkness is very similar to the coming of ideas out of the subconscious. احنا هيك ربطناها. بس شوفوا المفاجأة اللي بالأخير، الشاعر فجأة يقول لك يعني لقيت نفسي كاتب قصيدة. Right? Now if you ask any poet, how do you write? If you ask any poet, هسه أجيب لك أي شاعر ولا شلون تكتب القصيدة، يقول لك ما أدري، هي تجي. How does it come? Suddenly a poet maybe he will go on writing and then suddenly he finds himself that he has written how many pages, how many lines, right? It happens just like this. It is mysterious. Where does it come from? So we were really surprised in the end with this last line to see that actually after all this process, what happened? The poem came into existence. Finally, the poet was able to write. So what does this poem basically tell us? The fox is an extended metaphor. So throughout the whole poem, تعرفون extended يعني نقصد به إنه هذا metaphor من بداية القصيدة لنهايتها مستمر ممتد. For the creative process, just like the fox that comes out from the depths of the forest darkness, so are the thoughts that the poet needs in his writing come out from some unknown place of the subconscious. Unknown, actually we are not sure. يعني تذكرون دول القدماء كانوا يقولون الأفكار إلها ميوزز، دول الميوزز هاي الآلهة مالت الإغريق كانن 9 إذا تذكروهن، أخذناهن بالمرحلة الثانية، عفوا بالمرحلة الثالثة بالأوغستين Age. They believe that there are muses who inspire. احنا بالعربي نسميه شيطان الشعر. يعني هو لأنه الإنسان ما يعرف هاي الأشياء مصدرها منين، فيقوم يخترع لها أسماء مسميات، شيطان الشعر، ميوز، آلهة تلهم الشاعر، فكل واحد حسب ثقافته طبعا. Just like a hunter. This is really nice because it relates to Hughes himself. Hughes, I told you, if you go read his biography, you'll see that actually he was a hunter. As a young boy, he used to be a hunter. The writer should be patient. You know, the hunter is always patient, waiting and sitting in quietude and stillness, waiting for the prey. شايفين الصياد قد يصبر وينتظر الفريسة مالته اللي راح يصطادها. So just like this, a writer should be patient. The writer should be just like a hunter. He senses the presence of some mysterious liveliness. Okay? يعني بالبداية من نقول something alive، يعني يحس أكو شيء حوله بحياة يعني. And it is just a matter of time and focus before he could grab it on paper. Just like a hunter, you should have this sense. You should be patient. You should be able to focus and try to bring these ideas out on paper to write a poem. Like a fox on a mission to find a prey or a mate, the poet uses instinct. Now we can see what is similar between the poet and the fox. يعني هو الفوكس احنا صح قلنا عليه هو ميتافور للأفكار، بس بنفس الوقت أكو أشياء يشارك بيها ويا الشاعر. They are similar in some at some point. What is this thing? Like a fox on a mission to find a prey or a mate, the poet uses instinct to follow the trail of a poem. You see, fox or these wild animals, how do they find their prey? شلون يلقى مالت خلينا نقول الطريدة، مو شلون يلقاها الثعلب؟ uses his own instincts. هاي الغرائز الطبيعية اللي عنده هي اللي تخليه. And the poet is something similar. There is something similar for the poet. He should use his instinct and try to follow the trail of the poem to find out where is it, where is this brilliant idea that he can turn into a poem. The speaker implies that a poet does not necessarily know what a poem is going to say before it's written. Okay? يعني أنت عندك أفكار بس مو بالضرورة تكون عارف هاي الأفكار شنو هي بالضبط. You are still not sure what are they, but you know by your own instinct that there is something that you want to speak about, something inside that you want to write down. Okay? And instead uses a kind of primal or primal, I think, intuition akin to a wild animals. Because actually Hughes, because he has spent so much time in nature surrounded by animals, hunting animals, so he tried to, let's say, to transfer this connection between the world of nature and specifically the animals into poetry. يعني هاي فكرة حلوة إنه هو حاول يربط الشيء اللي كان يحس بيه تجاه الحيوانات كصياد، حاول ينقله من خلال الشعر، حاول يربط الطبيعة ويا الإنسان بس من ناحية شوية مختلفة يعني. The poem is a reminder of other meta poetry. Meta poetry, what does it mean? It means a poetry which speaks about writing poetry. يعني وين ما تلقى شاعر أو قصيدة تتكلم عن كتابة الشعر، كيفية كتابة الشعر, where does it come from, the inspiration, the force, the spirit that the poet needs in order to write poetry, the creativity in poetry. كل هاي المواضيع اللي نلقاها بالقصائد تخلينا نطلق على هذا الشعر اسم ميتا poetry. أوكي؟ يعني قصائد تتكلم عن الشعر نفسه، عن عملية الخلق الأدبي أو الشعري. It actually reminds us of other poems like, for example, Coleridge's Kubla Khan. You all know this poem, it's very famous and you have studied this poem in third year. إذا تذكرون قصيدة قبلاي خان اللي هي أيضا تتكلم عن شنو the imagination and the poetic creation. Where does it come from? You know that Coleridge, he wanted to write this poem out of his dream and then he was interrupted, and how he came out again with a fragment in order to complete the poem. We also have Blake's The Tiger. This poem is also about somehow some interpret it as a poem about also the poetic creation. قلت لكم اكو بيها لاين يحكي عن the coming down of the stars. هاي ايضا بعض يفسروها يعني انه لها علاقة بقدوم الالهام للشاعر. Coming down of stars is associated with the coming down of ideas and inspiration for the poets. So this is all about this simple yet very deep and beautiful poem by Ted Hughes. Hope to see you soon in other videos. Thank you.